following program is distributed by the Bears Barroom Radio Network. It's presented live over mixlr.com and later disseminated in podcast format on most delivery platforms. It's intended for all audiences. Never before in the history of sports podcast has one show made this promise. Draft on Tap will report on every college prospect pro scouts are looking at for the 2020 NFL Draft. Every one of them.
Sanders, smothered. Chase Young, another big play.
Montez second and goal. Steps in. Caught, touchdown. The third passing touchdown of the first half for Steven Montez. There's Johnson. He's got it. Touchdown, Texas. An open man at the 25. A foot race for the tight end. There's that man again. Albert O with his second score. 47 yards.
Draft on Tap with Bears Barroom draft analyst Danny Shimon. Your host, Ryan Badgley. And featuring some of the most respected draft analysts in the country. Grab a beer. We're about to make history.
Everybody, it's Badge kicking things off with my emotions right there for you after yesterday's news of the trade for Nick Foles. We'll get into that here in just a little bit, but making history is what we do on Bears Barroom Radio Network. Again, I'm your host, Ryan Badgley, and welcome to Draft on Tap. We have a great show planned for you tonight as we'll welcome in Aaron Lemming in just a little bit to talk Bears free agency. But first, let me welcome in Bears Barroom draft analyst Danny Shimon. Danny, how are you tonight, bud?
I'm doing well. I'm staying in the house, not going outside, and making sure that keep my social distance. That's a phrase that everyone's been using nowadays. But man, that was a ugly cry. Is that you actually crying?
Yeah, I probably could have recorded myself actually crying yesterday.
There's no crying in free agency.
Oh, well, there was yesterday. I feel just about as bad today, but I'm a little bit better as the more I talk about it, the more I seem to, I don't want to say feel better, but become okay with it. We hope everybody is staying corona-free and social distancing like they should be. This is a very different time. Not something I've ever seen before, Danny. I actually start working from home tomorrow for the first time in a number of years. So while I'm kind of excited to work from home, I'm a little unsure of how long this is going to be.
Yeah, I've been working from home now for about a week, and like I was telling you earlier, like I don't like it. I mean, it's okay, beat the traffic 1 or 2 days a week, but it just I like going in and just kind of BSing with the guys and just interacting with people. Here I'm just kind of I do IT work during the day, scouting at night, but IT working during the day. So it's more fun, just going out there, kind of just having that camaraderie with the guys and all that stuff. So, but it is what it is. We have to follow. The rules here and just make sure to kind of, stop the spread of this horrible virus. So, I'm going to do my part. I'm just going to stay in and make sure, continue watching some more tape, breaking down some of these draft prospects.
Yeah, without a doubt, Danny. And we might as well get right into the free agency talk. And guys, we've got a special guest with us on Draft on Tap tonight, none other than Aaron Lemming. Aaron writes for the Bear Report on 247 Sports, the Windy City Gridiron, and the Blitz Net. Aaron, welcome to Draft on Tap, my friend.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. I did not know that Danny was an IT guy as well. So we got some stuff in common tonight, huh?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm an IT guy in the morning, like I said, and a draft scout at night. So
let me ask you this then, before we get started here. I'm kind of curious. How are you working from home being an IT person? Because I'm not. I mean, I'm basically doing nothing.
Well, I'm a voice engineer, so what we do is basically we do a lot of support through, and we have a VPN connection to our network. So a lot of the stuff that we do, we can do remotely in terms of logging into people's systems and being able to monitor and the network and or our voice infrastructure. And if there's anything that we cannot do or need to do physically, we have people that are actually in the building that we can reach out to, and they can just be our hands and our feet for us if we need to.
Must be nice. And then, Mr. Badgley, I just gotta say, I really enjoyed watching you on the NFL Network talking to Mac and Patricia. I had to.
That was his long lost twin.
I loved it. It was awesome. It was like, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah, right. It was pretty cool. I'm hoping I'm hoping he comes back home. Aaron, the story, him and I went to the same high school. So, known each other a long time, and I'm hoping he comes home here soon so I can take him out to dinner. Well, I won't be taking him out to dinner, but maybe it'll be after all this is over, because it'd be nice to sit down and, have a normal conversation, not a rushed, hey, we got to go kind of a thing. But it's great to catch up.
One guy who won't be taking Patricia out to dinner is Darius Slay. Did you hear him just rip into him today after he got traded?
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah, I ripped him to him. Said, I guess, from what I saw real quickly, it was just Slay said that Patricia told him, why are you working out with some of the top corners? He goes, they're great. You're just good, or something like that. And some of the names that he had out there was, I think it was Patrick Peterson he was working out with, and Richard Sherman. And he's like, why are you working out with them? They're great. You're just good. As was the quote that Darius Slay was quoted today after the trade. So yeah, he's ripping into him. But
kidding.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, maybe he was trying to get a little something out of him, I mean,
he got him into Philadelphia, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. So we're going to talk free agency to start the show, and that's why we brought Aaron on. And Aaron, you heard my thoughts at the start of the show on Nick Foles, and I saw some of your tweets yesterday, and today, and I see you're not, I don't want to say a fan, but I think you're okay with the move. Your thoughts?
I'm not okay with the move. It's just kind of one of those. I don't know, man. I just want to 6-7 to score and talk about similar things, and it's just it's hard to really convey my overall feeling because I'm not a fan of it. I think that out of all this is the thing about this quarterback class, I guess you say, even if you're just talking free agency here, where there were so many different options, whether you're looking at trade, whether you're looking at free agency. I mean, even if you're looking towards a draft, I mean, there's so many different options to be able to get a quarterback. And I was never one of those people who was like, the Bears should definitely go out and spend one of the second-round picks on a quarterback. I mean, they could if they wanted to, but that's not really a quick fix. The Bears are in the middle of a window. We all understand that. They're trying to capitalize. But the one guy that I absolutely did not have in mind that, I thought would have been on the bottom of the list was Nick Foles, and here he is. And I think part of it just because it is Nick Foles, and then part of it is because they gave up a 4th-round pick for him. And that is what really bothers me out of all this, is that you gave up a 4th-round pick for somebody who, realistically, the Jaguars should have probably given the Bears something in return to take him. So it feels rushed, especially with the options that are still out there. I'm not a Jameis Winston fan at all. I don't even consider him an option, but you had Cam Newton. I understand health is an issue there. Let him get cut, and then, try to figure out a physical, try to figure out where he's at, see what the cut designation is when they cut him. There's multiple options. Wait out Andy Dalton a little longer. I don't really, in my personal opinion, I didn't see any need for them to rush into a trade with Nick Foles, especially when they gave up a 4th-round pick. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that was my thing too, Aaron. It was giving up that 4th-round pick because we heard the rumors, we heard the stories that Jacksonville was going to probably turn a team over to Gardner Minshew and that they were going to look to dump Nick Foles in that contract. And some of the stuff we were hearing, whether it's true or not, was they were willing to part with a pretty good draft pick for you to take that contract off their hands. Kind of like a Brock Osweiler a couple of years ago, where the 2nd-round pick was had by the Browns to take him away from off of Denver Broncos' hands. So that's what I was looking forward to. And they got Nick Foles. I knew they were interested in him because of the familiarity with John DeFilippo, obviously Nagy, and Laser had that connection with him back in Philly. So, and he's a guy. I think initially my reaction was just like you guys, like, all right, man, we could have done better than this. The guy I was holding out hope for, which might have been unrealistic, was Derek Carr. I was hoping somehow, some way, Gruden and those guys would be like moving on from Carr, and then the Bears could kind of finagle him and bring him onto the team. However, that didn't work out. But with Foles, the initial news was shocking. The fact that they gave up the 4th round pick, but then I kind of slept on it and thought about it, and we're going into uncharted waters here with probably not going to have OTAs. We're probably not going to have a full training camp. So they wanted to bring a guy, and this is my thoughts. They want to bring a guy in who's familiar with the offense, who's going to be able to come in and from day one push Mitch, and compete for that job, and be a viable competitor for that position. So I think that may have played a part of their thinking. Again, giving up the 4th round pick really stings because, like I said, all the rumors were that the Jaguars were looking to give you a pick, to take him off of their hands. So, but they were able to, I guess, renegotiate that contract. And I was telling Badge earlier, Foles now has an option to void the contract after this year and after next year. So, my thing for you, Aaron, is do you think he'll go into the camp as a like a backup, or they're going to come out and just say, you know what, it's going to be open competition. We do not have a starter right now going into camp, and let the best man win.
Well, I think it's an interesting question. That's something I've been pondering in my head as well, because when you look at it, especially when you look at competitions in the NFL, especially, I mean, there's always going to be that one guy that's going to get the first shot, right? I mean, that's just the way it goes. And I think if you're leaving that decision up to Ryan Pace, I think it's absolutely going to be Trubisky. And if you're leaving that decision up to Matt Nagy, I think it's going to be Nick Foles. And so it's going to be interesting to see if Ryan Pace will actually let Matt Nagy be the head coach of this team and make that decision. I think it is going to be an open-ended competition. I think that unless Trubisky makes giant strides, and keep in mind, I was a huge Trubisky guy. I think that's what a lot of people seem to forget. I loved Trubisky coming out of the draft. Clearly, I was wrong. I supported the guy, defended the guy a lot going into last year. Thing is, and I think we can all kind of agree on this, is when you know. And frankly, I just didn't think he was anywhere near what he should have been. And you kind of wonder, especially from a mental aspect, is that going to work? And so my theory on it personally is, I think that they're going to go into this competition and camp somehow, or however they're going to deal with this. I mean, obviously we need to see what's going to happen with the coronavirus, but I think ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to go into this competition, and I think Trubisky's going to falter. I think that was one of the main issues that he had last year, was just the amount of pressure, and I just don't think he's one of those guys that handles things very well. And I think that Nick Foles is going to be the Week 1 starter. And again, you look at it, they've made a decent investment in him. It's not like they went out and signed Case Keenum for 3 years and $18 million total with a little bit of guarantees. I mean, they went out and they're basically guaranteeing Nick Foles this year, which is a little over $15 million, and they gave up a 4th round pick for him. I don't think that he's going to be brought in like a Teddy Bridgewater would have been, where it's like, okay, here's the keys to the car, you're the starting quarterback. But I do think that with the connections that he has to this coaching staff and at least what he's able to do, I don't think Nick Foles is a terrible quarterback. I just think they could have done better. I think if all things are equal and things play out the way that they did, versus what we saw last year from Trubisky and what we know Nick Foles is, I think Nick Foles will absolutely be the starter. I think it'll be a competition. It's just going to be interesting to really watch and see, does Ryan Pace win the initial, who gets the first shot, or is this really going to be an open-ended competition where there is no favorite? And if so, is this going to be an objective competition all the way through? That would be my concern.
So I pose this question to you related to Trubisky, Aaron, and that is, if you think back in this league when Drew Brees came in, Tom Brady came in, maybe Brady's a bad example because he had success almost right away, but a player like Drew Brees, and I'm not comparing Drew and Mitch here, but Drew Brees he was benched in his 3rd season before he really figured it out. And nowadays it seems so much like it's your quarterback's got to be ready right from the jump. There's no time for him to learn. Why do you think that is? Is it the desperation to win the Super Bowl that's got these teams, not really letting a player develop?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a good question because, I mean, yeah, when you really look at things, especially when you go back, 8-10 years, I mean, a lot of quarterbacks, look at Aaron Rodgers, a lot of quarterbacks sit back and they develop. I mean, you definitely have an argument there. And I think whether we want to or not, I think one of the biggest issues that I think a lot of people face, especially when you look at Trubisky, is you look at what Deshaun Watson has done, and you look at what Patrick Mahomes has done. Fair or not, I mean, when you're comparing the three quarterbacks together and you see just how far Trubisky is from those two, I mean, it's naturally frustrating. Now, the thing with me with Trubisky, and again, I've been a huge Trubisky supporter. It's kind of one of those, when I'm out, and I really hope that he does succeed. He seems like a great dude. The thing that really kind of concerns me when you start looking at his trajectory in terms of his overall numbers, the issues that he's had, and I have to go back and get the exact article, and this is something I can send you guys afterwards, so maybe there's a little bit more frame of reference. But I mean, he's comping much more to some bad quarterbacks in terms of his first 3 years in the league versus anything sustainable like a Drew Brees. I mean, is it possible that he could? I mean, yeah, for sure. And if he was to go to another team, let's just say the Bears cut him or whatever happened, and he went to another team and succeeded, I mean, that'd be great for him. I think a lot of it with him is it's not physical tools. I think he's got everything that he'd absolutely need. He's got the mobility. He's got the arm. I mean, he's got everything. I think there's something mentally with him that I just don't know that it's ever going to click. And unfortunately, like you just pointed out too, it's one of those things. The Bears are trying to win a Super Bowl right now. And especially after watching the Chiefs just win a Super Bowl with Mahomes, it's kind of one of those things. The Bears are in the middle of a window. Ryan Pace, in my opinion, has done a questionable job in terms of maintaining cap health, and some of the stuff that he's done, he's kind of kicking the can down the road. Yep. It's like they really kind of have to get moving here. And I think that's kind of the reason why, like it or not, I guess. I mean, it's Trubisky may not get a fair shake, or so what some people would view as a fair shake of 4 years, and figure out where he's at from there, because I don't think the Bears can really afford to do that.
So I'll turn it now to the other, one of the other moves the Bears made, and tight end Jimmy Graham. While the Foles news made me upset, the Graham move just kind of made me shake my head. We were one of the youngest teams in the league, and our first move that's released a free agency, we go out and sign an almost 34-year-old tight end. I don't get it, Aaron. Do you?
Well, I mean, this is the question I have. Who had Jimmy Graham as the first move that the Bears are going to make a free agency?
Right?
I mean, why?
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't make any sense, because it's like, I mean, obviously we're Bears fans here, right? But it's like, I'm pretty sure we've all watched a pretty decent amount of the Green Bay Packers over the last few years. It's like Jimmy Graham is a corpse of who he used to be. And it's one of those things, okay, so let me kind of preface this a little bit, because if he signed for 1 year, $3.5, $4 million, like, okay, that could make some sense. I understand the tight end position's an issue. Obviously, Austin Hooper got more money than the Bears could probably afford to spend on the position, especially with Trey Burton and what they already have there. But why give him $9 million guaranteed? That was what was confusing. But it's like, you watch him the last few years, and he's not terrible, but he's clearly not the same player. And he's I mean, his legs clearly aren't there the way that they used to be. And what's weird to me is, for as much as obviously none of us like the Packers, the one thing I will say is Packers fans do defend most of their players to the death, regardless of how good or how bad they are. I mean, we've gone through it with the Adrian Amos thing. I mean, we've all seen it. We've all seen it on Twitter. I don't know one Packers fan that ever really liked Jimmy Graham, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it was just because his play was so bad or what the deal is, but that was not the move I was expecting, especially when the Bears are so close against the cap, and even with some cap maneuvering moves, it's like they still don't have the flexibility that they've had in years past. That just seems like a really weird move to make to me, and okay, cool. He had more yards and whatever and touchdowns and any all the Bears tight ends combined last year, but that's not really saying a lot, at least to me. The move made no sense to me, especially at what they paid him at.
Yeah.
Do you think that?
Oh, sorry, Danny. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was on Aaron. Do you think the move with Graham at all threatens Trey Burns' spot on the roster?
I don't, because I think when you, at least in my opinion, when you look at what you have as far as cap space goes and what you could create by cutting him, I don't know that makes a ton of financial sense to cut him, even if you use a June 1st designation at this point. I think that they would be better served, because you can almost save the same amount of money if you were to cut, a combination of Ben Broniker and Adam Shaheen at this point than you could from, cutting Trey Burton. I think at this point, because of the investment that they've already made, it's like you might as well at least see what you have in the guy. I mean, clearly they're not counting on him for much, but at this point, I don't know that it really makes a ton of financial sense to cut him, because I think the upside's still there if he can stay healthy. So based on that, I would keep him around, but I wouldn't be expecting much from him.
So then we'll take it to Robert Quinn. I mean, I love this signing. Granted, he's been in the league a little bit, but last year, a big jump in sacks to 11.5. And finally, and hopefully somebody on the opposite side of Khalil Mack that is going to make an impact, on this roster. What did you think about the Quinn move, Aaron?
I actually really like the Quinn move. I'll say, I don't think, and I know the room was kind of split on Leonard Floyd. I know a lot of people didn't think Leonard Floyd was that good. I don't think he was bad by any means. I think that when you look at him as a player, it's like there's value for a player like that. When you look at, what they did to get him in terms of trading up from 11 to 9, and I mean, he was a first round pick. I mean, you've got to get more production out of him than that. But when you look at the overall fit of him versus a guy like Robert Quinn, I think it makes a ton of sense. And I think really it makes a ton of sense because all you got to do is go back to last year and really look at just the lack of pass rush that they had from not only from Floyd, but just as a team. They went from, 50 sacks down to 33. I mean, it was a much needed thing. And especially we saw the amount of holes that they had, especially at the edge rusher position when Akeem Hicks went out. So, yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, and the funny thing is, even for as long as he's been in the league, I mean, he's only 2 years older than Leonard Floyd. I think that from at least a pure pass rushing standpoint, I think that they're going to get way more out of him than they got from Leonard Floyd. And, I mean, it just just look at the contract. So, Robert Quinn gets 5 years and, 5 years, $70 million, and then you look over at Leonard Floyd and he gets 1 year, $10 million, and with some escalators that could get it up to $30 million. I mean, that says a lot in terms of what teams were valuing, both players at. So it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the defense is in a pretty good spot right now, and I think from a pass rushing spot, that was one area where they really needed to improve over last year. So I definitely like the move. The money makes sense. I mean, it's a pass rusher. I mean, especially at least with what it looks like with over the cap and Brad, it looks like what they have it projected as he's going to make a little over $6 million this year, and there's still a decent out going into year 3. So I think in worst case, you have him for 3 years. I mean, he'd still only be 32, going on 33 by that point. But I think this move makes a lot of sense. But again, this is another move that signals that the Bears are trying to win right now. You don't go from trying to be younger, like you pointed out at the beginning of the show, to a guy that's going to be 30 here in a few months. It's like they're without really going for it. So, I mean, I think the Bears think that they're still there. But again, I mean, this kind of all circles back to the quarterback move. But in terms of Quinn himself, I really do like the move. I thought that was, regardless of what the Bears had done all offseason, this was a move that I was always going to like. But this is clearly going to be my favorite move, I think, of the entire offseason, unless they have a nice draft.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I saw the Quinn signing, and it had me hopeful, that there would be some much better decision making. I'm sure at some point I'll get over the Foles signing, but I just got to deal with it. Hopefully he proves me wrong. That's my goal. But sticking with Robert Quinn, having a number like 11.5 sacks last year, with Khalil Mack now on the opposite side of him, and then you have Akeem Hicks, Bilal Nichols, Roy Robertson Harris. Then you look at Trevathan and Roquan Smith as your linebackers. Kyle Fuller at corner. We're not sure yet who the second corner is going to be. Not sure if HaHa Clinton-Dix is back. I know we've seen some hints on Twitter at that, but not totally sure. How do you look at this defense, Aaron? And besides corner and safety, is there any other spot where you could see improvement, or do you think they're ready to hit the ground running?
You know, I think in terms of their front seven, at least the starters, I mean, they're in really good shape right now. I think it's funny because I was just talking about this with somebody last night. When you look at inside linebacker, it's like, yeah, they lost Kevin Pierre-Louis, and yeah, they lost Nick Kwiatkowski. But Kwiatkowski, at least going into last year, was a guy that a lot of people want to cut. And then Kevin Pierre-Louis was a guy that was brought in at the very end of camp and end of preseason. I mean, it was one of those spots where I don't think anybody really looked at that spot and was like, wow, they got a lot of depth. I mean, they grabbed 5 guys, but I think that that's a position there where I think you can produce depth. I think that, you know, replacing Nick Williams in some way would be nice. But, I mean, they got depth there. I think really the focus should be one or the other. And I think it's going to be easier at safety just because of the veterans that are out on the market right now for them to be able to pick and choose from. I think safety is going to be a little easier to fill, whether it's bringing back Clinton Dix, whether it's signing a guy like maybe a Tony Jefferson. I mean, there's a lot of different. I mean, there's a lot of different veterans out there right now that the Bears can go out and get probably for a decent price. I mean, the safety market's definitely flooded. I mean, you can bring in a veteran at corner, but I think ultimately between Kevin Tolliver, was it Roberson? I think is his name, the guy that they signed from the CFL. I'm drawing a blank at his name.
Yeah, Trey Roberson.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm assuming at some point that they're probably going to add a draft pick or a veteran. I mean, I think that they can get by with that. I mean, especially when you look at the front seven, it's like as long as that group stays healthy, I think maybe outside linebacker, like the primary depth spot at outside linebacker, is something that they should probably target with either another cheap veteran signing or, you know, spend one of those second round picks on an edge guy. But in terms of looking at this defense overall, I mean, as long as guys stay healthy and as long as they get solid production, it's like that secondary is not gonna have to do a whole hell of a lot when you got Robert Quinn on one side, Khalil Mack on the other, and then you've got guys like Roy Robertson Harris, obviously Akeem Hicks. I mean, you got all those guys in the middle, and then you got, of course, Danny Trevathan and Roquan Smith at linebacker. I mean, there's so many different options to be able to get to the quarterback, and that's the thing. I think we can all agree that when you're looking at the defense, it's like that unit needs to be a little bit better than they were last year because you're looking for an improvement offensively. But the Bears aren't going to go from one of the worst offenses in the league to a top 10 offense with the moves that they've made so far unless something crazy happens. I mean, I just don't see it happening. So, I mean, the defense getting after the quarterback and getting back to that same unit that they were under Vic Fangio in 2018, I think is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, the one thing about the Quinn sign that surprised me a little bit was the amount of equity they've already had invested into this defense, and they went ahead and put some more money, you know, into the defense. Again, edge rusher was a need. That was one of the needs that I had, you know, identified in terms of coming into this offseason that they needed to fulfill. I just thought they were going to do it more probably in the draft or maybe like a guy like a Marcus Golden, one of those like second tier free agents. But you know, we'll see how that goes. Now, flipping over to the offense, Aaron, in terms of, you know, needs, I still think offensive line, whether it's a, you know, right guard or young tackle to, you know, put in the pipeline, and also a speed receiver are key needs on the offense. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think and that's kind of the tough part. You know, at least me, I'm looking at the offense, and it's like, where do you really get a lot of improvement going into 2020? I mean, a lot of it's got to come back from the quarterback position, but I absolutely agree that I think they need that speed threat at receiver. Granted, I'm not nearly as polished as you guys are with the draft, but at least everything I've seen so far is there should be a lot of good options in the draft. I was a little surprised that Albert Wilson didn't get released. I thought that would have made a lot of sense for the Bears if he would have got released. I mean, there's still some veterans out there that could make some sense. But obviously, right guard is kind of one of those. It's going to be very interesting to me to how they're going to be able to fill that position. Because again, there's a lot of veterans out there. Joe Person's one of those guys that got released today that could make some sense. Cameron Irving's another guy that he got his option declined in Kansas City. There's some familiarity there. There's some at least solid veterans. I'm not going to say good by any means, but there's some solid veterans that you're probably going to be able to get a little bit more from than what you got last year at the position. But I do think that maybe that's an underrated look right now that the Bears need to improve in, because, you know, it's one of those, the quarterback position may improve a little bit, but obviously, I mean, the run game's got to improve as well. And I think getting right guard figured out is going to be big. And I'm also kind of curious. I mean, we just got done talking about what tight end, but it's one of those, I almost kind of wonder if they're not going to spend another resource maybe in the draft, maybe not one of the second round picks, but another resource in the draft on a tight end. I mean, you can almost improve at every position at this point. I mean, obviously, quarterback's pretty well taken care of. I mean, running back, I guess they could add somebody if they wanted to. But I think you pretty well nailed it, especially with the tight end, receiver, speed receiver, and right guard, and maybe a tight end. I mean, that's probably going to be the focus, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that because, again, they're running out of resources.
Yeah, I'm just curious if this, prior to the trade for Nick Foles, I thought maybe this might have been the year that Ryan Pace invests in a developmental prospect in terms of the quarterback position. So I just wonder now with Foles in the fold, and Trubisky, we still got to see what they do with his fifth-year option. If they still will go ahead and try and bring in a developmental guy, but again, losing that draft pick for Foles, that does hurt. So unless he trades down, I don't see them probably utilizing one of those picks on a developmental kind of kid, coming in this season. But we'll see though. In terms of like the offensive line, we kind of touched about it real quick here. So do you think if they don't bring in a veteran, if they just go in and draft a couple of kids, do you think that the scheme change with bringing in Juan Castillo and some of the new offensive coaches, you think that'll be sufficient enough to kind of help boost and generate a run game finally?
I do think that bringing in a better fit, and this is something that I've kind of noticed, and I think we all kind of have with what Matt Nagy's done with the coaching staff, especially the offensive coaching staff, is he's gone back to familiarity, and it's guys that he's worked with, and I think that that's definitely a key. And I think bringing in Juan Castillo, it's not a sexy name. It's not like a few years ago when they brought in Harry Hiestand, where I think we all know who Harry Hiestand was, not just because of what he did with the Bears, but with Notre Dame as well. And obviously that didn't really work out very well. And I don't think that's really anything against Hiestand more as it is. I just don't think that everything meshed the way it should have. And, I mean, Matt Nagy's always had a problem running the ball, and I'm hoping that now that he has John DeFilippo in there and now that he has Juan Castillo and now he has Bill Lazor, that he could finally establish some sort of identity within the run game. And I think, but again, a lot of that's going to come down to figuring out the offensive line. And I 100% agree with you. It's something that you hit on just a little bit ago. They need some sort of tackle in the pipeline. And that's the problem, again, when you don't have a first-round pick, when you don't have a third-round pick, and when you're relying on those 2 seconds, and it feels like one of those seconds almost has to be traded back to recoup some sort of value, it's going to be hard. I mean, that's something they haven't really put any resources within the draft into the tackle position. So, and it's almost kind of why I'm more leaning towards, go out and sign one of these veteran guards that you can get for a year or two. And, like I said, a Joe Person, Cameron Irving, somebody like that, where you can get them for maybe $2, $3, $4 million on a 1 or 2 year deal. And, you've got Alex Bars, which is another guy that's going to be very curious to see what happens with him. It's like, it was one of those, I think a lot of people were high on him, but I think a lot of people were high on him because Harry Hiestand was his offensive line coach in college. Now that you don't have that, what's going to go on with that connection, So I think maybe pitting a veteran against 2 of the young guys that they already have in Rashad Coward and Alex Bars may make a little bit more sense. And then, like you pointed out, maybe drafting, with one of those second-round picks, maybe drafting an offensive tackle and grooming them, because at this point next year, I mean, they're going to be able to get out of both the Massey contract and the Leno contract. So I would lean more towards replacing Massey at this point than Leno. But at some point in time, I mean, you've got to start developing these tackles, because these tackles are doing nothing but getting more expensive, especially when you're talking free agency.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Aaron. I wanted to mention, I follow Rashad Coward on Instagram. Danny and I were talking a little bit, and I know, he did not perform well at the guard position last season. But I'll tell you, he's putting in the work this offseason. He's really, you see him on Instagram just busting his butt to improve and get better. Originally, when he was brought in, he was obviously on the defensive line. At first, they switched him to tackle. Is that something you could see maybe Coward going back to tackle, and that may help solidify maybe that Massey position where Coward is back there, or do you not see him really as much of a fit based on what you've seen so far?
What's funny is I actually thought that he would have been projected a little bit better out at tackle, and it's going to be, again, I mean, you look at it, and Cornelius Lucas just signed with the Redskins. They have an opening with that swing tackle position. And it's funny you bring up, moving him back to tackle. It's the same thing with Alex Bars. It's like, are they going to, that they had experimented with him at tackle as well. I mean, they definitely have some versatility upon the line to where they can, I think they should absolutely try to groom one of these guys, maybe draft somebody as well. But I mean, it's it's just they're kind of at a point where obviously you've got James Daniels and you've got Cody Whitehair locked in, right? And then between I'm assuming one way or another, one of those guys is probably going to be gone after this year. But you got to start getting things figured out, because you can't have this much. And that's the other thing that kind of bothers me is they have so much invested on this offensive line. It's not like they're just throwing out a bunch of dudes that they're paying $3 or $4 million a year and some low round draft picks. It's like, Cody Whitehair is on a second contract. He was a second-round pick. James Daniels is a second-round pick. They've paid, and not a crazy amount of money, but they've paid Bobby Massey a pretty good amount of money. They paid Charles Leno a pretty good amount of money. I mean, they have a lot of investments on this offensive line, and it's one of those things where it's like they've got to get right guard figured out, and they've got to get they've got to get things solidified, because I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing with, well, not a lot, but some of the issues that we're seeing with Matt Nagy's offense right now is very dependent on the offensive line play. And I think all we got to do is go back and look at how good the Eagles have been and how consistent that offense has been for the most part, outside of some of the injuries that they've had. But when you really look at that offense, one of the main reasons that they've been able to do what they've been able to do is because of how good their offensive line has been. And that's something that we just haven't seen from the Bears. And that's kind of something even with the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs have had a pretty good offensive line as well. It's just one of those, not elite by any means, but it's definitely a staple of what the Bears are trying to do. And again, Juan Castillo is maybe not a super sexy name by any means, but I'm hoping the familiarity of what Matt Nagy did with his coaching staff this year is going to bring some normalcy back in. And maybe we'll start seeing more of that Andy Reid style offense that we've been able to see over the first 2 years.
Yeah, that's the last. I know Danny's got a. You know what, Danny? Why don't you go ahead and ask the question, and I'll save mine for after.
Yeah, so we've been talking about all these other needs on offense, on defense. Do we still need a kicker?
I thought about that too, because Greg Zuerlein is technically a free agent right now.
That's the guy. Yep, that's the guy I'm looking at. Correct.
I don't think it hurts at this point. I mean, Pinheiro had his moments last year, but I mean, why not? Especially if you got a guy on a rookie deal, why not bring in some competition? I'm not opposed to that at all, because again, for as many issues as the Bears had, I mean, kicking still wasn't exactly a spot where I would say you look at it and be like, oh, they're fine. I like Eddie Pinheiro, but at the same time, I mean, he didn't really show enough last year for me to think that he's going to be that guy for good. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see, because I know when you look at Zuerlein's numbers in terms of field goal percentage, stuff like that, it's been a little up and down. So I don't know whether or not he would be somebody that would take a 1 year, $2 or $3 million deal with minimal guarantees, or where it wouldn't really hurt if you cut him or if you go out. I don't really know in terms of what the veterans are that are out there on the free agent market, but I'm definitely not opposed. Maybe not the crazy circus kicking competition that they had last year, but pushing Pinheiro with somebody, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that at all, and maybe it'd yield good results. So I think that's a pretty solid question, because that's something I've been wondering too. They have so many other needs right now and so many other focuses that kicking's kind of been overlooked. But I would say, at least in my mind, Eddie Pinheiro is not a guy that should just be handed the job right out of the gate.
That's crazy you guys were talking about that, just because I saw somebody mention Zuerlein being available today on Twitter, and I had that thought, but it wasn't where I was going with my question. But that definitely brings up some interesting thoughts. Aaron, we've had you for almost 40 minutes, man. So before I let you go, I want to go back to the Nagy discussion and his offense and how we saw things go last year with the run game. Yes, they bring in Foles, they bring in Jimmy Graham. Now, we brought in John DeFilippo, we brought in Juan Castillo. Obviously, these are things they hope are going to fix the run game. I feel personally, and I know some others probably feel the same, that, well, nothing's going to change if Nagy's still calling plays. As, he was the guy, he was the play caller last year. How much of what transpired last year with the lack of a run game, obviously the Denver game, they had, 7 rushes, I think it was. How much of that was the offensive line? How much of it was Nagy? And do you really think just by adding these coaches and not making much of an adjustment, it's going to change?
Well, that's a great question, and that's something. I mean, when you look at, here's the thing. I think regardless of if people thought Trubisky was a top problem with this offense and this team last year or not, I think in one way you either had Trubisky number one and Matt Nagy's play calling number two, or vice versa. You had Matt Nagy's play calling number one and Trubisky's issues number two. I mean, either way, it's an issue, and it's well and fine, like you pointed out, it's well and fine to go out and change all your coaches. But again, he's still the play caller, and I mean, let's be honest here. When you go back and you look at some of the Andy Reid coaches from this tree, and you look at Doug Peterson, who never actually called plays, Andy Reid, guys like that, it's like Matt Nagy is very far behind them, in my personal opinion. I like Matt Nagy as a coach. I really do not like him as an offensive coordinator, and especially a play caller. I don't know, and that's kind of the thing. I guess that's one of the things that we're going to have to figure out this year is how much of that was coaching, how much of that was issues with the quarterback position, and how much of that was issues with the lack of fit from the in the coaching department with Mark Helfrich. I mean, I will say that some of the run designs look like stuff that he ran at Oregon. Harry Hiestand, maybe his blocking scheme simply didn't really line up with what Matt Nagy was trying to do and what Helfrich was trying to do. I mean, they were in charge of the running game, so maybe making that change, all of a sudden things start flowing better. But I mean, it would be, I'm trying to find the right word here. It would be irresponsible, in my personal opinion, to look at what the Bears did last year on offense and not say that Matt Nagy was a huge issue as a play caller, because clearly he was. A lot of what he did made very little sense. So, yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because you can have a better quarterback and you can have a better offensive line and you can have different guys in there, but if a play calling still as predictable at some points as it was and just ridiculously over creative and just over complicated as it was and short and third and short situations, it's like how better can the offense actually get? I mean, that's a great question. I don't know. I'm optimistically hoping that because he's got different guys in here, maybe he trusts John DeFilippo a little bit more. Maybe he trusts Juan and Bill Lazor a little bit more. I really do hope. But Matt Nagy seems like a pretty egotistical guy. I mean, if we're being completely honest here. So that's going to be a big thing. Self-scouting as a whole is going to be a very big thing, even for Ryan Pace. There's some troubling trends that need to get fixed with this team. And I don't think it's really going to get fixed with the personnel this year just because of the lack of resources that they have. But I think, especially with the offense and just overall what they're going to be able to do, I think the defense is still going to be good. But when you really look at the offense, it's like, outside of quarterback, I mean, the biggest thing that can possibly change right now is a play calling and setting your guys up to be in a better position as a whole. And that's something that Matt Nagy absolutely needs to do. And that's a really good thing to point out, because that's going to be a huge factor in how much this offense improves or does not this year.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just something that I think it will. It's, I think, as you mentioned, of the third and short plays, I think back to multiple 3rd and 1s over the last 2 seasons. And it's, as a fan, you're nervous on a 3rd and 1, especially late game situations, but, you're call the right play. And then you come out and see some of these 3rd and 1 or 3rd and short calls where, it's Tariq Cohen handing off to Jordan Howard or David Montgomery or, last season, just think, not having the ball in the quarterback's hands that just drove me nuts and made me really ask the question, is anything going to change? But Aaron, we want to thank you so much, man, for taking 45 minutes out of your day to hang with us, talk free agency. Why don't you let our fans know, A, where they can find you, and B, if you've got anything you're working on right now you want to promote, the floor is yours, my friend.
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, thanks a lot for having me on. Really do appreciate that. You can find me at Aaron Lemming NFL on Twitter, and you can read my work at thebearreport.com or Windy City Gridiron. Basically, just kind of working on some best available stuff right now, and just kind of going from there. I don't know how much people know this, but I just got done moving from California to Dallas, Texas, so still kind of get my routine back in, so I'm not doing as much writing as I probably should be, and hopefully I'll be ramping that up. So I think the majority of my contributions, anything Bears related, are probably going to be mainly on the Bear Report right now, and then obviously on Twitter as well. So again, really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. It's so nice to be able to have somebody come on and chat with and talk with us. All Bears, that's really what we're all about, and it was such a pleasure to have you on, man. Hope you have a great rest of your night, and maybe we'll do this again down the road, bud.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Aaron, as soon as we get closer to the draft, maybe we can get you on there, at that point as well. Talk about some of the draft prospects.
Yeah, just let me know. All right, man. You guys have a good night. Appreciate it.
You too, Aaron.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Aaron.
man. Have a good one, bud. Danny, man, what a great interview. Aaron, such a good guy. Really tapped into the Bears and, what they have going on. And, Danny, I got a question in regards to free agency for you. And that question is this. So, being that we're still a month plus away from the draft, obviously we have some needs still on defense, offense with certain positions. Are there any spots that you feel the Bears will not go draft with, and they will stay in free agency to find the player they're looking for?
I feel like they're going to get one more player via free agency, and that's probably going to be a safety, because we talked about the safety position last week.
Yep.
And I think they want to go with two veterans back there. You and Aaron, and discuss some of the safeties out there, some of the veteran guys out there. One guy that I know the Bears have interest in, not sure if they're going to be able to get him, is Vaughn Bell, the kid from the Saints.
Sure.
Played at Ohio State. He's a guy that's a pretty good tackler in the open field. Aggressive in terms of run defense. Coverage wise, there's something there left to be desired, but I think that's the one more spot they're going to try and fill via veteran free agency. Now we talked about Clinton Dix, so I don't know if he's going to be one of their fallback guys in case they don't get someone else. But I didn't think that combination of Clinton Dix and Eddie Jackson really worked for me last year.
Same.
I like. And I know, the old school thinking of, box safety, a guy that's close up to the line of scrimmage, and a free safety, a guy that can play, with more range and some ball skills are the old school NFL. And I know nowadays defensive coordinators, they want safeties that are interchangeable. You don't want guys specifically, doing one thing or the other. So, but I just think that with Eddie Jackson's ball hawking skills and his ability to jump on routes and play, make plays on the ball, I think he's better suited to play that free safety, that rover position back there. And you need a guy like, that's why when Amos was here, he was more solid up near the line of scrimmage. He's a guy that was a sure tackler for the most part.
Yep.
So get a guy like that that can kind of partner with Amos. A guy who can, if he could bring you something as well, the second safety in terms of coverage wise, that'd be bonus. But a guy that can be a sure tackler, a guy that can bring some, some ability in terms of bringing a presence in terms of a guy maybe you can give you a physical presence back there as well. So I think that's what I would like to see. But yeah, in terms of answering your question, I think safety is going to be a position they're going to try and fulfill with free agency. Now, there was a report last night where they went ahead and they restructured Cody Whitehair's contract. So I don't know if they freed up more money for some of the guys they signed, or if that's just freeing up more money for another potential signing down the line. So the first wave of free agencies was where the big money is spent, but a lot of times you get really good bargains. Second, third waves of free agency, especially now. With what's going on in the world, a lot of guys are not going to be able to sign because they can't take physicals. So maybe you'll get a guy who gets antsy and jumps at an offer that the Bears give them, and they'll get a guy for 1 year or whatnot.
Sure.
And bring in and cover that spot. But yeah, to answer your question, I think safety might be a position that they may not address in the draft.
I've got to be honest. I kind of felt like you were going to say box safety, and I kind of knew that. That's kind of why I threw that question at you, because we talked about it on the Barfly Tailgate show pretty much all season last year, how not having a box safety or a player the caliber of Adrian Amos, affects Eddie Jackson. And I 100% agree with you, Danny, that, that's something that I think this team needs. And, I would like to see a veteran brought in for that. There's some guys out there. Is there, who would you be targeting, Danny, right at this point?
Well, we talked about Vaughn Bell.
Yep.
We talked about Trey Boston was a guy that I was hoping that they can get their hands on, but he's a guy that re-signed with Carolina. A guy that might not be a popular, choice amongst our listeners and fans is Eric Reed, the kid from the Panthers. I know he's had some things off the field in terms of some of his stance, and I know his backing and all that stuff, and a little bit outspoken. But he's a guy that he's on the field. He's still a good player. I think he had 4 sacks and I think almost 100 tackles last year with the Panthers, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a guy that just got released. He's only 28 years old. Had some seasons where he was, dealing with some injuries, but he had a pretty good year last year, stayed healthy. So that's another guy, a veteran that you could probably bring in on a 1-year contract. And I think that guy would complement Eddie Jackson nicely. Now, we talked about all the equity they put in, the money they put on the defensive side. So going out and getting a safety for a big contract probably is not in the cards. So you're going to be looking for guys like the Reeds, guys that are going to be, just recently cut. Antoine Bethea, I know he's up there in age, but the Giants, cut him, and he's a guy that last year had a solid season for the Giants. Not that the Giants had a great defense or anything like that, but
right.
Every time I watch him play, he was out there still making plays, and he's up there in age, I know, but that's another guy I'm talking about. You can bring him in as a, like on a 1-year deal, and just kind of have some of that, another veteran presence next to Eddie Jackson. Again, in terms of the corner spot, I know a lot of people are talking about cornerbacks. I think that's a position they might address in the draft. But the thing about it, with that pass rush, if everyone stays healthy, the corner doesn't have to cover much when you have 2 guys, flying off the edge, and you have, Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman, collapsing in the middle of the pocket. So, you might be able to get away with it with Kevin Tolliver, or maybe if this Trey Roberson kid from Canada comes in and again, not a guy that needs to cover for 7-8 seconds down the field. It's just a guy to be able to give the defensive front just sometimes a chance to get to the quarterback. So I think that, but again, safety. To answer your question again, it's just I think safety is going to be a position that they might go and address in free agency as well.
It's a have to, I think, and I completely just lost my train of thought. I was going to piggyback off of what you said with another question, and I completely forgot it. So, I just remembered. We're 53 minutes into the show. We had already talked about the defensive line, and we just brought up Eddie Goldman's name. So I'm a little bit embarrassed that I failed to mention him when I brought that up earlier, because he's really a cog in that defensive line. So thank you for bringing him up, Danny. But guys,
he's the guy that gets lost in the shuffle all the time. Though.
Yeah,
he's the guy that just solid, goes out there, does his job. No one really pays attention to him, but he's a guy when he's not in there, you notice his absence. So.
It's Scout's Corner with Bears Barroom Draft Analyst Danny Shimon, right here on Draft on Tap.
Well, the first guy I'm gonna go ahead and talk about here in Scout's Corner is a guy that I got a lot of requests for, and that's Solomon Kinley, offensive guard from Georgia. He's actually the 3rd guy on that Georgia offensive line that I've scouted this draft process so far. And while he's not as talented as the other 2, those being Isaiah Wilson, the right tackle, and Andre Thomas, the left tackle. He's a kid that at 6'3", 337 pounds, he's a naturally thick, squatty, fairly athletic offensive lineman who carries that weight well. Surprising balance and straight line foot speed, stepping to that second level easily and getting in front of a back as becoming a lead blocker for, again, a guy that size. Quick out of his stance, again, with that solid foot quickness and athletic ability. It displays functional play strength in terms of creating movement at the line of scrimmage. This is a guy that can drive, block, and is effective when he has an angle on a defender. He can torque and turn defenders out of the way using his big, strong hands and what's called good grip strength. He's a guy that wipes out defenders, on those combo double team run blocks. And he's more of like a road grinder, if you will, a power blocker, a guy who's better going, north and south as opposed to east and west. He can chip and release to the second level and latch on to those run fits. In terms of pass protection, he's solid with, in terms of his knee bend. He can provide, a solid 3-step drop protection. This is a guy that can mirror and keep a defender, in front of him as long as he's in a confined area. He works nicely with the center to create a formal wall there in front of the quarterback. And he can sit and he can anchor, displaying, his take-on strength, when facing a bull rush. He does a nice job of arching his back, resetting his feet. He'll pop and he'll reset his hands. So he does show the ability to take on those bull rushers. He's got good eyes and awareness, in terms of, he sit there, he looks for work. He doesn't just, if he doesn't have a guy in front of him, he doesn't just sit there and just, look at space. He's out there looking for work to pick up, the blitzers or any free defender or to help out. In terms of some of the things that I, why I rank him kind of lower than the other two guys is, he's got below average arm length for my guards, the guys I like to have. Limited blocking range in terms of, lateral agility. He's more of what I call a phone booth blocker, a guy that can, like I said, block in a confined space, doesn't have the ability to really to set out wide and keep a guy in front of him. Does not display, real explosive power to shock defenders, and then consistently blow them off the ball. So some of the things that, for a guy that once in a while you'd see him, getting good movement, but then consistently I didn't see him just blowing guys off the line of scrimmage. Is not sudden, and he lacks some of that elite recovery quickness. So again, a guy that's going to probably struggle out on the, if you ask him to go east and west, use some of that lateral ability to maintain his blocks, would struggle with that. And a guy, if he has to set wide, could struggle as well. So he's a guy that right now, my grade has him in a day 3 guy, probably in that 5th round range. But definitely a guy that you can come in and probably, like we talked about, putting him in a pipeline and just kind of maybe developing him. But he does develop, does have solid size, and he's got some of that, girth, and he's got some ability in terms of, creating some movement at the line of scrimmage. But again, he's more of a north-south blocker as opposed to a guy you're going to ask to do any sort of zone blocking or anything like that. So that is Solomon Kinley, guard from Georgia. So continuing on to our offensive line theme here. So sorry, man, jumped the gun there for a second there. So continuing on our offensive line theme here. So since offensive line is a need that a lot of our fans are recognizing, a lot of them are asking for me to go ahead and scout these guys. Sadiq Charles, guard, or actually tackle from LSU, the guy that I project to play guard. Charles is 6'4", 321 pounds, has 33-inch arms. Like I said, played left tackle for LSU, who this past season was voted college football's best offensive line. They were given the Joe Moore Award. Charles brings that flexibility in order to he can play multiple positions along the offensive line. Like I said, he started at left tackle. He's also started games at right tackle and right guard while at LSU. He's got average height for a left tackle, but he possesses the athletic frame. He's a solid athlete who plays with good knee bend and balance. Displays that foot quickness to step, slide, shuffle, and reach his set spot quickly. In pass pro sets, he's square to a defender. He shuffles and slides, like I said, laterally, and he keeps his man in front of him. He does not overset in pass pro, allowing himself to compete versus those inside counter moves. Aggressive with his hands. He will shoot them quickly, to attack a defender off the snap. Rolls his hips to generate that power I like to look for in my offensive lineman to move defenders off the line of scrimmage. Athletic, releasing out to the second level. Good at cut blocking defenders and taking out their feet. Uses that athletic frame, his hands, and that lateral agility, to maintain himself between a defender and a quarterback. So some of the things that why I see him probably going in that third round range is he's played left tackle at LSU. I see him probably best suited inside at guard. So I think that's going to probably drop his grade a little bit in terms of where he's going to be projected in the draft. Slow recovery in terms of, changing direction to get when he gets to the second level, to get quicker, faster, defenders at the next level. Average arm length we talked about earlier. Issues maintaining and sustaining some of the blocks at the line of scrimmage is really something that I noted down on my notes here. Guys were able to slip his blocks and get into the backfield, both at the line of scrimmage and once he got into the next level of defense. So, he's had some issues in terms of staying healthy. He missed some games, as a sophomore due to injury, and then this past season he missed some games as well, but that was more for disciplinary reasons. So there are some things that I need to check out on him, in both on and off the field. But definitely a guy that has played well this season, and coming into the season really wasn't seen as a guy that's going to probably be day one, day two. But now he's I think has a solid grade, a day two grade for most scouts, and for me, like I said, he's in a third round grade for me. So my next guy is Korres Watkins. He's a receiver from Southern Mississippi. I've continually talked about getting guys that give you the ability to create that big play potential downfield. And one of the nice things about Nick Foles, you were talking about him earlier, he throws a really nice, pretty deep ball. His downfield accuracy is much better than what we've seen from Mitchell Trubisky. So, if you bring in a guy who's got speed, who's got the ability to make plays downfield, at least Foles gives you the opportunity to hit those plays and make those connections count. So, Korres Watkins is a kid, again, from Southern Mississippi. A lot of guys may not have heard of him. But he's 6 feet, 185 pounds, has almost 33-inch arms, so he gives you that long reach. Ran a 4.35 40 at the combine, and he's a guy that when you put on his tape, again, he's a bit taller, slender kid. He's got that slender build, but he has that build-up speed, and he's got the ability to accelerate and create that over-the-top leverage. He can run away from defenders. He's a natural pass catcher. He's got, like I said, 9+ inch hands. He can extend away from his body and reel in the catch. Again, soft hand, sure-handed. He's got the body control and athletic ability. This is a guy that can go up and make a play in the crowd. He does a nice job of high pointing the ball. He's got some run after the catch ability as well. He catches the ball in stride, and you see him accelerate, use that speed, and run away from defenders. We talked about his ability to make plays in a crowd. Very effective on crossing routes. He uses his length and foot speed to provide that release for that quarterback. Terrific concentration and ability to locate the football. During when it's in flight. So a lot of times, he'll be running downfield, and at the last minute he'll look up and he'll locate the ball and reel it in and make a nice clean catch. So another thing about him is when his quarterback is in trouble. He doesn't just sit around and say, all right, my quarterback's in trouble, I'm just going to stay here. He comes back, and if the quarterback has scrambled or has broken the pocket and he's out on the opposite side, he'll run to that side and make himself available for his quarterback. He's a guy that this past season had 64 receptions, over 1,100 yards, averaged 18.4 yards a catch with 6 touchdowns. So he's a kid that really impressed me when you put on his tape. So definitely, and he also has if I look at his stats, I think he also has some punt return and kickoff return ability as well. So he gives you some of that extra boost on special teams too. So small school kid, a lot of times, we see these guys come in from these small schools and they have a trait, and this kid's trait is his pass catching ability and his speed and his deep speed. And we're talked about, I've been talking about consistently that the Bears need to add more speed on offense. And this is a kid that, while he doesn't have the juke, make you miss moves necessarily like some of the other quick twitch guys, he's got that deep speed and he's got the ability to take the top off a defense. And this is why I think he'd be a nice, late round selection for the Bears. And the final guy is we're going to cover tonight is Malik Harrison, middle linebacker from Ohio State. So with Malik, we talked about the Bears needing some depth at middle linebacker, having lost, Kevin Pierre-Louis, Nick Kwiatkowski. So he's a guy that I looked at. First of all, when you break down his tape, you notice big, tall, good-bodied athlete. He brings a physical presence to the middle of that defense. Start off, he was a former high school quarterback who actually wanted to go to Ohio State to play receiver, but eventually was flipped over to defense. 2-year starter, a first team All Big Ten this past season, leading the team in tackles with 75 tackles. He also had 16 and a half tackles for loss. So it shows you his ability to be able to penetrate, gets in between those gaps and get into the backfield and bring the ball carrier down for a loss. So again, with him, right away, we talked about that size, 6'3", 247 pounds, and he's got a projectable frame. He's got long arms with nice overall body length. Good athlete, carries his pads well, demonstrated that good straight line speed at the combine, ran a 4.66 40, showed some nice explosion in his legs with a 36-inch vertical leap. Good movement skills, plays on his feet and chases from the hash mark to the sideline. So he's got that chase down ability. Quick processor in terms of, he will key quickly and, use his foot speed and athletic ability to beat blockers to a spot. So you want those linebackers that can just key off of a movement from a lineman or a movement from a tailback to be able to key on that and then go to a spot and basically diagnose the play. Physical and aggressive in terms of a run defender. We talked about this earlier. He'll take on blockers and he'll occasionally go right through them to get to the ball carrier. Shows pop on contact. This kid possesses those heavy hands and he will strike a blocker, and a lot of times you see that blocker's head just rock backwards. So he's got those heavy hands. On outside runs, I like the way he scrapes over the top and he flows to the football. Okay, he's a solid wrap-up tackler. He's a guy that 9 out of 10 times will bring that guy down, the ball carrier down in the open field. In coverage, he's solid in zone. He's a guy that drops back smoothly, to his landmarks, and he shows good awareness and an ability to pounce and basically on all those underneath routes. And to really provide that much, showing the ability to line up on 2 points on the case, and he'll surge when he converts speed to rushes the tackle. Kind of concern me about cut player, and he can do a better job of protecting his legs. A lot of times you see the lineman go for his legs, and he doesn't do a good job of protecting them, and they wipe him out of the play. Limited flexibility. Shows some stiffness, when he's forced to decelerate, or change directions in the open field, he allows his pads to rise, and that allows him to get knocked around inside, get washed up, if you will, by the offensive lineman. There's times where he doesn't trust his eyes. What I mean by that is he can be sucked in by RPOs and play action, and he'll hesitate, and he won't just go for the play. He'll kind of stop and wait, and by give him that tailback or the quarterback that split second allows them to get an angle on him, and they beat him to the outside. So he's got to be able to trust his eyes and be able to go ahead and attack downhill quickly. When he fills the hole on his run fits, he chops his feet. When he's approaching the hole, what that does is that doesn't allow him to get his base underneath him, and doesn't allow him to go ahead and launch or unload into lead blockers. So, and we talked about him being aggressive in terms of downhill run defender. Some of that aggressiveness can get him out of position and overrun some plays. So, and which then allows the running back to cut back behind him and gain some yards. So some of those things is what I put down. Now, overall, to me, Harrison is more like a throwback inside linebacker. If you got a 3-4 system, you're thinking like the old school Steelers. You got those big beefy guys in front of them, the defensive line, two gapping, holding out blockers, allowing him to get a lane and run straight down to the ball carrier. And like I said, he's a sure tackler, bring down that ball carrier in the backfield. So that's how I see him. Now, when I project into the NFL, I could kind of see him also as a strong side Sam linebacker that's going to be lining up over the tight end in a 4-3 system. He's a guy that, to me, compares favorably to KJ Wright, the kid that plays for the Seattle Seahawks. He's got that length, he's got the athletic ability, and I think he's going to be able to, carry tight ends down the field. I didn't see much one-on-one man coverage in terms of him being utilized that way in Ohio State. But I think he's got the foot quickness, he's got the athletic ability, and they got the build and the length to be able to compete versus those tight ends down the field. So I think, if you're going to be looking at Malik Harrison, I think you're looking at him, if you have a 4-3 system, as a Sam linebacker, if you're running a 3-4 as a middle linebacker.
It's Scouts Corner with Bears Barroom Draft Analyst Danny Shimon, right here on Draft on Tap. Danny, a great episode, great players in Scouts Corner, man, and another great show, man. Aaron, a great guest, so much fun talking free agency, and now, Danny, they've announced that the draft is still on, and to me, I think I'm more excited than anything that the NFL kept not only free agency at this point, but they're keeping the draft. Yes, it's going to be different, but at least we've got some stuff to talk about, because without it, man, I'd be going nuts.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, with free agency starting this week and, them keeping the draft. Imagine if they had postponed free agency. Imagine if they pushed back the draft. We'd literally have nothing to talk about in terms of, like sports, watching sports and all that stuff. So, but, in terms of, free agency, it's just revving up right now. Like I said, there's going to be another wave of free agents coming up, and the draft is going to, we're going to continue breaking these guys down as the Bears make, more free agent signings. They may or may not, remove some needs off their draft list. So, a lot of these guys, these names that they, as you went over right now, are guys that you guys wanted to hear about. You guys wanted me to scout. So, keep those names coming in. If there's anybody out there, I'll just hit me up on Twitter, at dshimon56 or at DraftTap. And just let us know who you want me to scout, and I'll get some tape on them, and we'll go ahead and we'll break them down for you. But the participation from our listeners badge in the Scouts Corner, the names they've been giving me has been phenomenal. So they know what the Bears need. They know who they want me to scout. So I keep welcoming those names, so those suggestions. Just keep piling them in, and I'll get to them as soon as I can.
Yeah, without question, Danny. We've had a lot of participation, and we appreciate it from all the barflies out there. Can't thank you guys enough. And man, what a great show tonight. As we want to thank Aaron Lemming for joining us and his most recent thoughts on the Bears. Another great Scouts Corner with Danny, and thank you to everyone who listened live and joined us in the Mixler chat. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. If you can't join us live, you can find the podcast version of Draft on Tap shortly after the live show on all your favorite podcast streams. Thank you to everyone at Bears Barroom who continues to make the network as spectacular as it is. Please join us next week for another episode of Draft on Tap. Hope everybody has a great night. Stay safe, and remember, shelter in place if you can, folks. Thanks for joining, and good night, everybody.